Um, okay, great. It looks like we have a lot of participants on. Hi, everyone. I'm Naina Gupta. I'm the Director of Policy at the National Immigrant Justice Center. I'm thrilled to have each of you here with us today for this briefing on the Chance to Come Home congressional resolution. We're grateful to the 4 members of Congress who are leading this resolution and for their support on today's briefing. The introduction of this resolution takes place today at a moment when deportation is dominating national headlines. Just last month, former President Trump reiterated his threat of mass deportations if elected, and we've seen recent expansions in the use of deportation through executive order. All of this is the culmination of a historical trend of increasing deportation. The U.S. deported over 400,000 people in 2012, nearly 7 times the number it deported in 1996. Amidst this context, this bicameral resolution, introduced today in the House by Representatives Emanuel Cleaver, Adriano Espaillat, and David Trone, and in the coming days by Senator Cory Booker, aims at confronting the long-lasting harms and injustices of deportation that tear families apart and weaken communities across the U.S. This resolution is also about the people the U.S. has deported. The unjustly deported include U.S. military veterans, civil rights activists, former DACA recipients, parents, business owners, and a disproportionate number of Black and Brown immigrants. Many deported people are stranded abroad, even though they have strong claims to lawful status here in the U.S. They remind us that deportation is a deprivation of liberty, an action harsh and punitive in nature with detrimental long-term consequences for families and our communities. But today is also about their fight for a chance to come home, to reunite with loved ones, sometimes after years of exile. This resolution calls on members of Congress and administrative agencies to support a specific policy proposal that would offer deported people a meaningful chance to make a case to return to the U.S. You can learn more about the nuts and bolts of that proposal via an FAQ that we've pasted into the chat. And at the end of today's briefing, we'll hold a brief Q&A session to answer questions. Please use the Q&A chat for any questions you have. We'll field those at the end, and any that we can't get to, we're happy to follow up with after the briefing. I'm honored also today to have 3 speakers here with me who bring a wealth of expertise and personal experience to this discussion, including Dr. Bill Hing, Professor of Law and Migration, Professor Bill Hing, Professor of Law and Migration Studies at the University of San Francisco, founder of the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, and author of Humanizing Immigration. Lindsay Kozlowski, the Executive Director and co-founder of Immigrant Defenders Law Center based in California. And live from Haiti, Paul Pierless, a New Yorker who was deported after more than 3 decades in the US, who is now fighting for a chance to come home from Haiti, where he is. Before we get to our conversation with our 3 speakers, I'm excited to share with all of you a short film produced in partnership by the National Immigrant Justice Center and award-winning filmmaker Alex Rivera. This film tells the story of Howard and Vanessa, 2 immigrants, both deported and one trying to return.
My name is Howard Bailey.
My name is Vanessa Laquis Mendoza.
I was originally from Jamaica. I was 15 years old when I came to New York.
I was born in El Salvador, and I left when I was 9 years old to the United States.
I signed up for the military. I got married. I started a family and I started my trucking business. Things finally was looking up.
When I was 16, I got pregnant. My oldest son, Jason, he had Pompe disease, rare disease, didn't have no cure.
Get out there, Jason!
He used to be like, Mom, stop screaming so much because you embarrass me.
In 1995, I just got out of the military then, fresh, not even 6 months. And I get arrested for marijuana. My lawyer told me I had to plead guilty because it's Virginia Beach, I'm black, and I'm Jamaican. I didn't think that in 2010 that the marijuana conviction that happened 14 years ago would have came back and haunt me. About 5:30 in the morning, I heard a big knock on the door. Boom, 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 boom. And I opened the door. And then it was like, Howard Bailey? I was like, yes, sir, that's me. Did you apply for citizenship like 6 months ago? I'm like, yeah. And it was like, turn around, that's why we're here. I'm like, what? And they just grabbed me, man. And they just put the cuffs on me. And I was like, what's going on? He was like, yeah, you're getting deported. And my daughter came down and saw me in the handcuffs. She was crying and screaming and asking why they taking him. My daughter lost me. My wife lost me. My son lost me. I was separated from everyone that I loved.
It was a day before Jason's birthday. I wanted to do him a little party. I went to the store with a friend of mine. She was like, oh, let's just take it.
A group of migrant women is coming forward with claims that they were the victims of unwanted and unnecessary medical procedures at a federal detention center in Georgia.
Surgeries were performed on several detainees without them fully understanding what was happening.
As a female, it feels like somebody just run you over and left you destroyed. That's how it feels, because it's something that they did to you and you have no idea. After surgery, I was bleeding every day. I was not getting no answers. I told my dad, I'm gonna sign the deportation. At least in Salvador, I can find a doctor that is going to help me and find out what's going on.
I was in Jamaica. Oh, man. I didn't know what to do.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety. We'll now turn to Mr. Bailey, who's participating virtually. Mr. Bailey, please proceed with your testimony.
I have now been living in exile for 8 years. 10 years if I include the 2 I spent in immigration jail fighting my case. The last time I saw my home was 10 years ago. And since then, life feels like a total nightmare. Every day I hope that I would wake up and just be back home in Virginia again. And I remember going to the bathroom and looking in that mirror. I don't know who I was looking at. I'm just asking for a chance to come home to the country I love, the country I serve. The States of America.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Thank you.
When I come back to El Salvador, I was like, Dad, I'm not gonna make it. Like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
When my mom got deported, it changed a lot in my life. My mom was responsible for my medicine, taking me to the doctor. I was just lost. I was like 15, 16 years old, lost. Everything went downhill.
I remember where I was at. I was in the country. The signal, the phone signal was not even working that good. They told me that ICE looked over your case and they decided to overturn your immigration case. Oh my God, man.
Mr. Bailey fought for our country, and I'm happy to fight for him.
And I saw Brandon. When I left here, Brandon was this high. I'm back in the trucking business. Everything start coming right back. It still feel good to be out there. You get your mind free. You focus on the road. Like therapy to me, I feel I needed this.
It's hard because I'm not there. I gotta hear him through the phone. I gotta see him, like his voice. He doesn't sound like my baby no more. He sounds like a man now. And it's hard that I'm missing those special moments that I should be there. I hope that I do get a chance to go back and spend as much as time I can with my kids, to be there with them, to see them grow up and do things right.
We're gonna have to wait and see what happens in court.
We're gonna have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully everything goes good.
I'll be back there soon.
Before we say more about Howard and Vanessa and turn to our panelists, I'm thrilled to introduce the Honorable Emanuel Cleaver, who represents Missouri's 5th Congressional District. He's a senior member of Congress, the former co-chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and he's been an incredible champion on reuniting families and loved ones torn apart by deportation. He is one of the members leading the introduction of today's resolution. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, I am delighted to be with you, and I want to thank you. I want to thank the National Immigration Justice Center for all of the amazing work you do. It is, in my belief, God's work. This is the work that is inseparably connected to religion, whatever a person believes. This is the thing that I would say is a right thing, the right thing for us to be doing. We're trying to reunite with this legislation families that have been devastated by our unfair and our unjust deportation system that we have in our country. It is irregular, inhuman system that we put together for immigration. And America is and has always been a nation of immigrants. And I will say as often as I can that we ought to be proud and we ought to be happy to declare that as Americans, we are the first cousins of the world. You can go to any part of this planet and find people who are connected in terms of their families to the United States of America. And in the past decade, I'm not proud to say that we have deported over 2 million people. And not all of the deportations were fair. I believe in legal immigration. What I am upset about is that the system is not only not legal, it is not fair. And I can't tell you the humiliation I felt. It was one of the worst moments I think that I have experienced in elective office. And that was the day that we found out about what our government was doing and actually taking babies, taking children away from their parents. I have 4 children. It is unfathomable to think that somebody would actually come to the conclusion that it is all right to do that. It is wrong. And the legislation that we have put forth, we think that if we're able to get this to the president's desk, he will sign it. And it was also allow the Department of Homeland Security to help us reunite many people in this country with loved ones. We ought to be a nation of love, and because we have been blessed perhaps much more than we deserve. But when we do things like this for me and for others, it is a moment of shame, the despicable practice of separating families. So my colleagues and I are working together, and we are not even close to backing away or surrendering. We're going to keep on this road to create justice for a lot of Americans, no matter what happens. So thank you for what you're doing, but for the fact that we have been able to depend on you for some direction and some counsel, we may not have had the opportunity to introduce such legislation today, but it's introduced. It is now in the bloodstream of our legislative branch of government, and I hope that we can come to you one day and report that we just passed it and we're headed to the White House to get the president's signature. God bless you, and thank you for what you're doing.
For introducing this resolution, for supporting this proposal through the appropriations process and every possible way. You've been such a fierce advocate. You joined us last summer and shared so many stories of constituents you've met over the years who have decades of life in the US, who have been up against the deportation machine. So we're grateful for your personal connect to this work. And thank you for the gratitude to NIJC, but we do this work alongside the deported advocates who join us today, and very many organizations and advocates around the country who are doing their best to help people come home to be back with their loved ones and in their communities. So thank you again for joining us. Yes, go ahead.
Let me say
please.
one little thing, because I talked about the shame. Between 1942 and 1945, the United States of America did one of the most awful things that a government could do. I think we imprisoned in the United States 120,000 American Japanese or Japanese Americans. The United States, we did that. We imprisoned Americans in about 10 separate camps around the United States. We must never go back to that. If we don't fix this problem, future generations are going to look back at us and say about us what I'm saying about the Americans who put Japanese Americans into prison. Again, thank you for the work you're doing.
For taking time out of your day, for introducing this alongside your colleagues, and for stopping by our briefing. We're again very grateful for your leadership. And we just watched a film about 2 of our deported advocates. We shared that film last summer when we launched the Chance to Come Home campaign. You joined us then, and one of those folks who everybody just watched and met, Vanessa Vaquez Mendoza. She was able to return to the US just 6 months after we started this initiative with your support last summer, and she reunited with her children in a powerful airport reunion, which reminds us of the humanity at stake at the heart of this proposal. And so again, thank you for being visible on this and public on this so that we can do more to bring people like Vanessa home, since unfortunately that is the rare exception. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Take care. Howard Bailey's joyous return in 2021, which all of you just witnessed in the film, was the inspiration for the Chance to Come Home campaign, which we've been leading here at NIJC alongside 10 deported people living in exile, each who've been fighting to return with the support of their relentless legal teams. As I mentioned, Vanessa, who you just met, returned soon after we launched this campaign. But unfortunately, her return and Howard's return are exceptions. These kinds of returns are exceedingly rare. That's why the Chance to Come Home campaign calls on the Biden administration to establish a central unit within DHS that would meaningfully review requests for return from people who've been deported despite their significant ties to the US. That's the proposal that's championed by the congressional resolution introduced today. A central unit like this would use existing legal mechanisms and would not need a new law in full from Congress. It would simply take mechanisms that help people make claims for return, that are supposed to help people make claims for return, like humanitarian parole or request to reopen cases, and put them in the hands of a central unit rather than with line level ICE decision makers. Right now, the mechanisms we have don't work in practice, and this would be a way to get them to work better. The unit would be oriented toward reuniting families and providing a meaningful review of requests to return that take into account the research and data on how deportation harms families and communities, which we'll hear more about today from our speakers. This proposal has already received the support of over 60 members of Congress. It's garnered support in the congressional appropriations process. And we know we need this because returns like Howard and Vanessa's are, again, the exception. So I want to turn first to our first speaker, Paul Pierlis, who is an essential part of the Chance to Come Home campaign. He was born to Haitian parents in the French territory of Saint Martin, but moved to New York when he was 5 years old. He received an order of deportation back in 2003 due to a single drug offense he received as a very young man. But ICE allowed Paul to remain in the US so long as he complied with the agency's requirements, which he did for nearly 15 years as he built his career as a financial planner and lived a rich and full life as a New Yorker. But then in the last days of the Trump administration, he was abruptly detained and put into rapid deportation proceedings for this very dated, decades-old offense. His community, including members of Congress, fought to keep him home, but he was deported to Haiti, where he had never once set foot. And just last month, the governor of New York issued a gubernatorial pardon for the old offense that led to his deportation. But even now, Paul, you're fighting for a chance to come home with the support of your legal team at Haitian Bridge Alliance and RFK Human Rights. So I want to turn to you, Paul. Thank you so much for being with us. Can you tell us a bit more about your life in New York before your deportation to Haiti, and describe to us the night that you learned that you were being deported?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Nana. My name is Paul Pierlis, as I stated. I'm a longtime New York resident. I lived in New York for 35 years, came here when I was 5. I attended K through 12 college here. As mentioned, I worked as a financial consultant for 13 years, advising and creating financial plans for individuals and families that are riddled with debt. I'm a New Yorker. I miss my family. I'm a family guy. I miss things like Thanksgivings, birthdays, Christmas, communions, baby showers, and barbecues. I'm also somebody who's of faith. I grew up, in the Baptist church, so I'm a Christian. And the main thing that I actually miss is time with my loved ones. I haven't seen my loved ones in about 3.5 years. They couldn't come see me because, of the conditions in Haiti. The seaports were closed, the airports, the borders were shut down because of things like shooting at the airports, gangs burning police stations, prison breaks, and things like that. When I learned about my deportation, it was late December of 2020. That's when it was during the pandemic. I called ICE to confirm if I should come in for my scheduled order of supervision, which is a check-in. ICE instructed me that to come in just to my local police station rather than coming to the check-in, which I found disturbing. I received several phone calls from ICE, and they told me to come in that following Monday, which never aligned with my regular scheduled check-in. So that Monday, I go to the check-in at Federal Plaza. As I go for the check-in, I'm told that I'm no longer on supervision, that I'll be going home. So, you know, I was taken aback by that. And I asked the officer, like, what do you mean I'm going home? I'm confused. He said, you're going to Haiti. I told him that I wasn't from Haiti. I've never been to Haiti. And that was never actually ever disputed. You could check my file. So after that happened, I was, you know, shortly shipped to a bunch of different states across the country. This all happened very quickly. Didn't get an opportunity to speak to my attorneys, didn't get an opportunity to communicate with my consulates. And before you knew it, I was on a plane on my way to Haiti.
For sharing that. And, you know, I've heard you say to me before, like it was a total nightmare. And as one of our other deported advocates who was deported to Sierra Leone after 40 years of life in the US recently said to the Washington Post, it was like being buried alive. And it, you know, it seems like that has resonated with your experience as well. So I'll turn back to you in a minute just for us to hear more about what life has been like just trying to survive in Haiti the last 3+ years. But I want to turn next to Lindsay, who is the founder and executive director of the Immigrant Defenders Law Center based in California, who's close to the ground and this work. You know, there are many organizations working to try to bring folks like Paul home. Lindsay, maybe you can tell us a bit more about what IMDEF has done to give deported people like Paul a chance to come home to reunite with loved ones, and then share with folks, you know, from where you're sitting and what you've seen, why is it so hard for people who have such compelling cases like Paul or Howard to make a case to return? What are the barriers that they are facing?
Yeah, thanks, Nana. And thank you, Paul, for being here today and sharing your story. You know, I'll start by saying that most of the folks that we have successfully brought home through IMDEF's programs have been deported veterans. And that is because we do have a program, IMVETS, that really can serve as a model for what is needed to help bring more deported people home. But, you know, through the IMVETS program, IMDEF has been able to bring home, as one of the only organizations with a holistic program that represents them both in their immigration cases as well as in their post-conviction relief cases. We've been able to bring home about 25% of the total number of people that have been brought home through IMVETS. But we are just one organization, and there are very few programs like that around the country. We receive requests from people like Paul, who are not veterans, who have very sympathetic cases, who, as he said, are living this nightmare of having been unjustly deported, of having been ripped away from their families. And unfortunately, for most people who have been deported, who don't fall into that IMVETS program, there are insurmountable barriers to coming home, to reuniting with their families. So the deportation really creates a permanent family separation in so many cases. The real reason for this is because there's a lack of a centralized process. And I could talk for an hour. I only have about 3 minutes, so I could talk for an hour about how complicated the legal process is. We have hours of training for our attorneys who work on these legal processes. But in order to come home, people need to either file an appeal to a federal court or they need to file a motion to reopen an immigration court. To do this from abroad, the expense, the short timelines, the inability to access counsel, all of these things make it essentially impossible for somebody who is outside the United States, who is just trying to survive, to engage in that process. In addition to that, access to counsel is a huge issue. As I said, we are one of the only organizations in the country working on deported veterans, never mind working on cases of deported people worldwide. There are hundreds of thousands of people who have been deported, as you heard from the congressman, and the ability to access counsel in the United States to engage in that process is incredibly difficult. And lastly, I'll just say that the other process that Nina talked about earlier, humanitarian parole, is really an inefficient way for deported people to seek return to the United States. And it would be the only way for them to enter the United States to even begin the complicated processes of appealing their case or to engage in a motion to reopen. They need to go to frontline Customs and Border Protection officers and DHS or to ICE attorneys to seek that discretionary ability to reunite with their families. That is not an effective process. That is not true due process for people who've been deported. And ultimately, with something like the MVETS program, we see a program where there's political will to help people come home. Outside of for deported veterans, we need to see that political courage to create a process that is fair, that is just, and that will allow us to bring families together, and that is not reliant on who is president, who is in charge of DHS. We need a process that's fair for the United States at all times. And that really starts with creating a centralized process like MVETS, which is not a perfect program, but that at least starts the beginning of a process that allows us to bring people home in a fair and efficient manner.
So that's so helpful. And, MVETS, it was established in 2021. I understand that there are at least 100 veterans who've been able to come home and reunite with loved ones since that started. And this, like you say, it's not perfect, but it is a proof of concept. We know DHS can do this. They can set up a unit like this. They can help folks with extremely compelling cases get meaningful review. That's basic due process. And you guys have reaped the benefits of the work you've put into it by bringing deported veterans home, which is meaningful, important work, as the congressman says. So I want to turn next to you, Professor Hing. Professor Hing has devoted his scholarship, research, teaching to advancing racial and social justice as an expert on the immigration system. Professor, we heard in the film so much about how Vanessa Vaquez Mendoza's son, Jason, relies on her essentially to survive as a young disabled man. Tina Hamdi, another one of our advocates, who we'll learn a little bit more about later. She's stuck in Morocco trying to reunite with her two beautiful children who've been here on Capitol Hill, talking about how they can bring their mother home. They're growing up near Dayton without her, even though she spent her entire life in Ohio. So could you just share with folks, based on your research, what are the most significant harms of deportation on children? What does the evidence and data and research tell us about that?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share what I've learned over the years, but just a little bit of history. And thank you, Paul, for sharing your tragic story. And I hope nothing but the best for you and that you do get to come home. The history is that prior to 1996, somebody like Paul and the individuals that were featured in the film actually would have had a shot at a second chance. There was something called 212C relief, and it applied to people who had been convicted of aggravated felonies. And listeners should understand that there are some very, very minor offenses that are classified as aggravated felonies. And once it's classified as such, your hearing lasts for 5 minutes and you don't get to apply for relief anymore after 1996. And even prior to that, there was an opportunity for something called a judicial recommendation against deportation that state court judges could engage in. And so there was a time when things were much more fair than they are today. But to your point, it's every day, not only do we separate children from adults at the border, even today, we do that. If they're not with their parents and with some other adult, they're separated. But also every day, we deport people, we deport parents who have US citizen children in the United States. And when I've discussed this with pediatricians in particular, they cannot believe that we would do such harm to children. And I've been pointed in the direction of adverse childhood event studies, ACE studies. And those studies show that when parents are deported and their citizens' children are left behind, this significantly alters their neurobiology. Their brain development is critical in determining future health. The adolescents face additional vulnerability in terms of maturation of brain regions, essential for social emotional skills, cognitive, executive functions, judgment, and impulse controls. So not only does this expose you to trauma, but it also leads to lifelong increased risk for such serious chronic diseases in adulthood, like cardiovascular disease, chronic lung disease, hypertension, suicide, substance abuse, and other illnesses. So in essence, deporting parents of children, it's not just sad for the child. It actually has long-term permanent effects on their physical and mental health, in addition to their economic status and success in their future and their academic achievements. So what we're doing in separating parents from their children has this lifelong devastating impact on the neurobiology and the social success and educational successes of the children.
Yeah, that's really helpful to explain, Professor. And the resolution text, the text of the resolution being introduced today specifically names the medical evidence and research on how children are harmed by deportation of parents, whether or not they go with their parent. Either way, that process of deportation has this long-lasting harm that we haven't talked about enough in the work we do in concrete terms. And we can talk a lot about the harms the person being deported faces, but that this experience and this process has longer lasting ripple effects on everybody around the person deported, has implications in the long term for immigrant communities and their livelihood and the social capital that they can build. So I want to turn back to Paul. Paul, so now you've been in Haiti for over 3 years. You have dealt with this separation that the professor is talking about and describing. Would you share with folks a bit more about your life in Haiti and what the hardest part of this injustice has been for you and how you've been surviving there on a day-to-day? Oh, Paul, you're still on mute. So if you want to unmute and start over, that would be great. Sorry about that.
My apologies. No,
All
what I
good.
was saying was that it's been really, really tough. My life is in limbo. I feel like my deportation to Haiti essentially has been a death sentence. Give you an example. Around the summer of 2022, there was a state of emergency in Haiti. There was a lockdown, right? So my life and well-being was threatened. I became extremely ill. I lost my appetite and I was bedridden for about 7 days, and I lost 15 pounds. I couldn't get the medical attention that I needed because of the lockdown. The hospitals were closed. So not having access to just basic healthcare put me in tremendous risk. I actually haven't had a physical or a dental in about 4 years, right? These are just basic human rights. So the hardest part of being here is I even had several near-death experiences, right? I was shot at twice randomly on 2 separate occasions, caught in the crossfire on the highway. I once witnessed a man get shot in his face at that instant, and he was fleeing. There was at one point, my house was even burned down. We believe it was possibly arson, but that's just part of the reality of living here. I feel like I'm a prisoner in my own home because I rarely go out due to the dangers of violence. I'm living in hiding. I constantly move from place to place. So I don't know if the viewers they're aware of this. I'm not like in just one area. I'm constantly moving place to place. When things get hot, I'd have to leave and go to another area just for my safety. So I don't have a stable home. I know 3 people who were kidnapped, 2 of them of which were my neighbors, and my barber was kidnapped. Tragically, I know 7 people that were killed as well. So the insecurity, the violence, the kidnappings. I mean, there's a ongoing civil war, and people are being terrorized. Another part of what makes this experience extremely difficult is I don't have any financial independence. I used to be a financial consultant, and I was actually the person that would help take care of my family, and now I'm the person that's a burden to my family. During my first year in Haiti, I blew through my entire savings. I don't work. There's no job opportunities, and it's very hard for someone like myself to ask people for help, because I'm usually the person that usually helps assist my family, and it's difficult as well with the language barrier. Coming here, I didn't speak Haitian Creole, so it's kind of difficult for me to articulate certain things. It's very frustrating when you're not understood. Another thing which is extremely difficult, which which the viewers might not know, there's a huge stigma against deportees, right? The reason why there's a stigma is because it's definitely frowned upon, because people look at deportees as like, you blew it in the United States, right? You're in the land of opportunity, and you're sent over here. So those things are definitely definitely challenging. And again, having those near-death experiences and things like that, very challenging, and being put in harm's way.
Paul, for sharing that. Obviously very heavy, and the stigma that you talk about, I know in the past it's been a challenge to speak out and share your experience, because even just doing that puts you at risk, which makes your advocacy today especially brave and powerful, but has also led to some amazing outcomes, like the pardon you received from the governor of New York, who's essentially acknowledging that this experience you're having, as you said to me, feels like a disproportionate, unjust double punishment, right? That, all these years later, that you would be in repeated near-death experiences for something that happened decades and decades ago, when you did everything you were supposed to, plus more, has that unjust double punishment feel to it. You've described that many times before. I want to turn back to IMDEF. I think that Lindsay had to jump off for another obligation, but we have Margaret with us, who's also at IMDEF, and I believe the legal director there, although I'll let her make sure I have her title correct. But I wanted to just ask you, Margaret, if there are any cases that IMDEF has worked on, you know, whether they were deported veteran or not, but that come to mind in terms of what you've heard Paul share that resonate with you and what you've seen in the clients that you all are representing who've also been deported and dealing with a challenging situation.
Hi, so I am Directing Attorney of Policy and Advocacy at Immigrant Defenders Law Center. And I just want to share one example of some of the many amazing people that we have helped to come back to the place that they've always known in their hearts to be home. So I can share the example of our client Daniel, who was deported, and there were insurmountable challenges with regard to his case that I just want to talk about, you know, how difficult these cases can be legally for people to really understand, you know, what is needed in order to reunite families and just also individuals that have been removed and that need to be made whole again and given a second chance. So Daniel, for example, you know, first filed post-conviction relief. He had to file it twice. With our assistance, after his conviction was vacated and he was given the legal ground to reinstate his lawful permanent status, you know, his father became ill and he desperately wanted to be with his father when he looked like he was going to be passing away. So at that time, you know, in immigration court, we had to file, you know, a motion to reopen his case, to seek that it be terminated and closed. We asked CBP for him to please let him come while all this is being, you know, pending so that he can be there by his father's side who is passing away. And CBP denied his humanitarian parole. You know, and his father passed away. And then through INVETS, you know, on the positive side, he was granted parole through the program. And, you know, he was able to reunite with his mother, help care for her, rebuild his relationship with his two daughters with whom he had lost connection for many years because, you know, as you know, some of us may forget, you know, we didn't have FaceTime and all these technological capabilities, you know, from the years of which in 1996 when these laws became very harsh and people were removed. So people were really disconnected from their loved ones. And, you know, the beautiful side of the story is that he was able to rebuild that relationship with his daughters. You know, I can tell you that not only Daniel, but other individuals that we've helped through the IMVETS program are really inspiring people that, you know, lived almost their entire lives in the United States, were separated from their family, were desperate to come home, but never gave up. We have another client who, you know, was separated from his children solely because of a marijuana possession. And, you know, his children remained in the United States. Their mother, unfortunately, couldn't take care of them. They were put in, you know, foster care, and he would have been there for them. He would have been there to, you know, be the father they needed at that time had we not deported him because of, you know, that marijuana possession. And he, luckily through the IMVETS program, has also been able to come to the United States to reunite with his children. And so there are just endless stories of positivity that we've seen, but unfortunately, the IMVETS program is not perfect. A lot is needed, and disappointingly, I have to share that we lost one of our deported veteran clients who we were trying to get here back in the United States through the IMVETS program. And we've lost 3 clients, you know, since we've been trying to help them return to the United States under humanitarian parole. So while we know that we have the capability as a country to create a program such as what was created in 2021 to return people back to the country that they call home, to their family, to their communities, we know that we need to do better within those programs so that people don't languish while the programs, you know, while their applications are pending, and that we can provide them justice in a much faster capacity.
Margaret,
Such a evocative kind of snapshot of what I think any of us who are doing these return cases, representing folks in these return cases see, you know, this losing folks while they're trying to get humanitarian parole, the beauty of bringing people home, but knowing that that's really an exception. You know, you mentioned humanitarian parole, what we've seen repeatedly are folks applying for this humanitarian parole for urgent medical or personal reasons, and those applications not even being looked at before those emergencies have just gone on so long that it's too late, which underscores how ineffective the current processes are. So I think this, you know, resonates with the experiences of the 10 people leading Chance to Come Home, who are really represent so many of the clients you describe. We're, you know, a little bit behind on time here, so I'm gonna ask 2 more questions, one to Professor Heng and then one to you, Paul, to give you the last word. We're happy to stay on to answer any questions. There are a couple that have come in the chat. If there are more, please share those. We have an FAQ on our policy proposal. We're happy to follow up with answers. You know, Professor Heng, when I hear Margaret talk about what she's seen with the people she's represented, and I hear Paul share his story, it reminds me a bit of the research that exists on how mass incarceration and the war on drugs in the US, which talks about this kind of revolving door nature of the criminal system and how that has stripped communities, particularly low-income Black communities, of social capital and community networks in ways that were destabilizing for decades. So from what you've seen and studied, in what ways is deportation a parallel type of government-led disruption of communities and lives? And if it is similar or the same, what does that mean about the due process that we should be offering to people who have claims to return?
Well, the fundamental answer to your question is that due process requires us to give people a fair chance. And they don't have that fair chance because of the summary deportation that results from being labeled an aggravated felon. Let me remind your listeners and viewers, what we are advocating for is not a method of averting their criminal justice responsibilities. Every one of these individuals have actually gone through the criminal justice system and served their time before being turned over to ICE. So it's not a way of absolving them of their responsibilities. And you alluded to this, but the answer is that they need, it isn't just double jeopardy, it's triple jeopardy. They have been incarcerated, then they're deported, and the third jeopardy now is that they can't get back in. So the system is just not aligned for fairness.
Right, and just to bring this back to your experience, Paul, I mean, Paul has a pardon from the governor of New York. He spent 15 years living in New York well after the single offense that led to his removal, and still under current immigration law, that pardon is not enough for him to immediately return home. Which underscores the level of injustice in the current system. Paul, I want to give you the last word here before we close and take any questions. You know, why did you want to join this briefing today, and why do you support this resolution and this campaign, even if it means you're still having to fight to come home right now?
To your point and Bill's point, a lot of folks, they've done their time, they pay their debt to society, and they now being double, triple, in triple jeopardy. I feel like it's just unfair, and I think it's unfair to have to be penalized in that way. And the reason why I actually support the Chance to Come Home resolution is because I know that I'm not the only person that's going through this type of ordeal. I know there's a lot of folks similar to myself who want to reunite with their loved ones and their family. You know, there's mothers and fathers and brothers, sisters, cousins that want to be back with their family. And I just think that there should just be a more transparent, effective and efficient way where folks can actually reunite with their families. And there's a lot of people that are voiceless, that they would now get an opportunity to be heard, and again, have an opportunity or a chance to come home. That's why I support the resolution.
So much, Paul. It's always such a privilege to work with you and hear you speak. I want to just wrap us up before we go to questions for folks who can stay on for those. We had nearly 200 people register to join this briefing, so even if they weren't able to join, they'll be receiving a recording. This is a real showing that we've seen repeatedly with this campaign of growing support. If you are a congressional staffer who has joined, we really encourage your boss to join this resolution. This is a way for us to signal both to communities who are impacted by this, but also to the administration that we need a process, that this is supported by members of Congress, that members of Congress want the laws that are supposed to help Paul and Howard and others and Vanessa and Tina come home. They want, you all want those to work. So hope your bosses will join us on this. If you are an advocate or a deported person, please join us by signing our petition and checking out our Chance to Come Home page and staying in touch. Petitions can be an important way to signal the growing support we have for an ask like this. And before I turn to a couple of questions we got in the chat, we want to play a short clip from a recent piece on NPR's Here and Now, which features this campaign and two of our incredible deported advocates, Tina Hamdi and Asia Serrano, who are both single mothers, one in Morocco, one in Panama, who've been fighting to come home to reunite with their kids. I'll let my team hit play on that, and then we'll turn to questions.
I mean, I see that they struggle emotionally. They don't necessarily know how to deal with things. I don't know if anyone could imagine, but like imagine you leave your kids and they're like 2 and 4 laying in the bed and you say bye and you're going to come back, but then you just don't come back. Until this day, they really don't even understand how or what the reasoning is. My first need to come home is to be able to be a mom to my kids. That's all I could ask for, and that's all I really want, because I feel like I was robbed of that. You're not gonna feel it unless like you're wearing the shoes, but it's so hard. It stays in the back of your head that you have something out there that you can't get a hold of and that you want to be there, but like your hands are tied and you can't do anything and you just don't feel like whatever you could have done. People change and people make mistakes and they move forward, but they have to be given a chance to prove themselves. And that's all we ask for.
You can check out that powerful interview on NPR. Anytime to hear more from Tina and Asia and about this policy proposal. Thank you so much to our speakers and everyone for joining. I want to answer one question that we received in the chat, and then Paul, if you're okay with it, we had one small question for you. Maybe I can actually start with that just quickly to say, we have somebody here who put into the chat, what can we do to help Paul? How can we help Paul? How can we support him? And so I thought just to, toss that to you when you think about the folks joining today and the people who want to be a part of this. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, if you're a staffer in Congress, you can contact your local representatives, contact the people that's putting this petition together at Chance to Come Home, RFK, reach out to contact the president, let them know that, this is unjust and I view it as double jeopardy, triple jeopardy. It just doesn't make sense. I got a pardon and I'm still here fighting in a country where that's extremely dangerous, where, I'm fighting for my life basically. So reach out to your congressman, your representative, and just notify them, let them know that there's a gentleman in Haiti that wants to be reunited with his family. It would be greatly appreciated.
Paul, and just for anyone still on, we are supporting RFK Human Rights and Haitian Bridge Alliance and their efforts to bring Paul home. We've done tons of outreach to the New York congressional delegation as we amplify the call for him to come back. So stay tuned as we continue to lift up that work and ask folks to support it. This last question before we close, somebody put into the chat, do we have any idea of the spread of countries where the people who would qualify for this opportunity are currently living? Is it possible in the current Congress to even pass a broad bill, like this? So just a few things to reiterate. One is that the administration already has the laws and tools it needs to implement the central process in our proposal. This is actually an ask of the administration. It's an executive agency ask. We don't really need Congress to pass a full law. But today's resolution is significant because it shows that there are many members of Congress who support the administration doing this. That's what this resolution is about right now. It's also a way to get this idea out in the water so that at any moment, as Representative Cleaver himself said in Newsweek earlier today, it's a way to say this is something that has to happen when we do finally get to a place of overhauling our system. And then on the point about where folks are coming from, one thing is that DHS doesn't really collect data on to where they're deporting people, or, was somebody a veteran? What ties did they have? It's very hard to know exact numbers and geographic locations, but since we first shared this proposal through the white paper we published 3 years ago, we have heard from people from all over the world who have experienced unjust deportations in every region, very many countries, who could be eligible to seek relief through a process like this. And we want to make this happen. We know that Black, Brown, and Indigenous people are disproportionately targeted for deportation, and were especially so under the Trump administration. And so that is a repeat pattern that we see in this work. I think that is those are all the questions. The last is that I see, is there a deadline to join the resolution? Yes, the deadline, as I understand, will absolutely be extended. This will be should be an open congressional resolution that members can join in the coming weeks. We'll be reaching out to congressional offices to educate them more on this proposal. Last summer, as I said, we had 60 members of Congress support the very same ask. We hope to get, to 100 or more members supporting. So I will make that clear when we follow up in the coming days and ask offices to join. But again, thank you so much, Paul, for being here. Thank you to all those who are still on and joined us, to all of our speakers, and to the amazing members of Congress that continue to champion this ask, even in a really challenging moment in immigrant rights. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.